Hello and welcome back to another episode of Different Theories. We want to first thank everyone for their support for our last episode. We really appreciate it. And we believe that this episode will be even more exciting. One of the upcoming MCU projects that many are excited about is Spider-Man No Way Home, which is now confirmed to involve the multiverse, bringing back characters we love like Alfred Molina's Doc Ock. There is also a high possibility that all three live-action versions of Spider-Man will appear at the same time in this movie. However, what if, in an alternate timeline or universe, Marvel and Sony decided to make No Way Home, but with no multiverse? What if No Way Home is just a direct sequel to Far From Home involving only Tom Holland and the main timeline MCU characters? Can the movie still be cool?
Yeah, so for this episode, we decided to take a little bit of a different tack. This episode of Different Theories, the team has sort of come up with a story that includes absolutely zero multiverse elements. This is going to be a true Tom Holland individual Spider-Man movie, and we intend for it to be a culmination of everything we've seen so far. So our narrator, Soren, will be taking us on an amazing journey through this version of the movie. We hope you enjoy the video.
Our story picks up right after the mid-credits scene of Far From Home, where Mysterio exposes Spider-Man's identity to the public. Scared for his loved ones, Peter calls them one by one, telling them to stay safe. Now, beginning to hear the sirens, Peter realizes that the police have found him and swings away from the scene. Meanwhile, an unidentified individual breaks Mac Gargan out of prison. After learning of Spider-Man's newly revealed identity, Gargan receives a high-tech scorpion suit from his shadowy benefactor who tells him that vengeance has finally come. We cut back to our hero to find him relatively winded, the police in hot pursuit. As the chase continues, Scorpion ambushes Peter, making known his desire for revenge after having his plans foiled in Homecoming. Spider-Man fights Scorpion, and although Peter emerges victorious, he is left with an injured leg, making him unable to run. As Spider-Man is taken into custody, Scorpion escapes. In the interrogation room, Jennifer Walters introduces herself as Peter's court-appointed defense, asking whether he understands the charges levied against him, namely the killing of Mysterio. Remaining steadfast in asserting his innocence, Peter walks her through what really happened, though his spirit dampens a bit as Jennifer describes how difficult his story would be to prove in court. Scorpion meets up with a large group of bounty hunters. Suddenly, we pan down to see a jagged blade protruding from his chest, Scorpion's body falling away to reveal Kraven the Hunter, hands stained with the blood of the man he deems inferior. As a quick aside, our version of Kraven is basically a walking arsenal equipped with the most advanced weapons and gadgets, a bit like Bloodsport from the Suicide Squad. The actor we have in mind for Kraven is Javier Bardem. No Country for Old Men and Skyfall proved how terrifying Bardem could be as a villain. In larger news, J. Jonah Jameson skyrockets in popularity with his continued defamation of Spider-Man, gaining him more and more followers on social media. Message boards fill with glorification of Mysterio, also with alarmist fear-mongering about Spider-Man. Conspiracy theories about Peter, Ned, MJ, and May run rampant. Though Jennifer tries to get Peter released, the judge sets an extremely high bail due to the publicized nature of this case. The next morning, Pepper Potts arrives to bail Peter out of prison. Peter returns home and reunites with May. Peter sees that May is watching the news about him on TV, and he sees a stack of death threats on May's desk. May turns off the TV and puts the letters away, telling Peter that none of this is his fault. Rest doesn't come easy to Peter. After some tossing and turning, he calls Ned, learning that Ned and MJ have become the center of attacks at their high school. He feels guilty, believing that he caused his friends and family to suffer. He starts to cry and calls MJ, apologizing to her and telling her that he's scared. MJ comforts him, telling Peter to stay strong, but Peter still blames MJ for not understanding him, telling her that he's a failure for being unable to protect her. Although MJ is also crying, she remains strong and tells Peter that everything will be okay. After the call, MJ heads out for a walk, hoping to clear her head. Eager to escape the many jeers from pedestrians, she heads down a side street, slumping down against a building for some peace and quiet. A faint beeping is audible just under the veil of the night silence, prompting MJ to search her bag. And there, she finds a tracker. She senses that someone is stalking her, and so she dials Happy's number. Peter wakes up from a night of uneasy sleep but is unable to find May. Her bedroom is empty. She's gone. Hearing Happy's ringtone from his bedside table, Peter frantically returns to his room, opening the door to find Craven, phone in hand, lurking on the other side. A fight ensues, leaving nearly every room trashed with debris. Spider-Man quickly finds himself outmatched, though he does still manage to escape. Naturally, Peter makes a beeline to MJ's house only to find her absent as well. He calls Ned, but the line just rings and rings. All seems lost. With his apartment destroyed and no one to return to, Peter has no way home. It's then that Happy finds Peter assuring him that Ned and MJ have already been brought to their safe house, though his efforts were too late for May. At the safe house, Peter reunites with Ned and MJ, who tells him of the tracking devices Craven used to stalk them. Peter apologizes to MJ for shutting her out on the phone as Happy relays that Craven is the man hunting them. An increasingly distraught Peter pleads that they must leave and find May, but Happy warns him they're in no position to yield the safety of their location. It's just too dangerous out there. Feeling that he's trapped in a corner, Peter begins to craft a new suit designed specifically for stealth. May wakes up in Craven's lair. As she sees the walls littered with pictures of Peter and his friends, a dawning realization settles in. Craven is a maniac, one who's willing to do anything to complete the ultimate hunt. Craven calls Peter, telling him that he has his aunt. Craven sends his location, taunting him to stop running before it's too late. It's one thing to give chase, but Craven likes his prey with a bit of backbone. He warns that May will only be the first. After all, the spider is nothing without its web. Dressed in his new camouflage suit, Peter sneaks out of the safe house. Peter arrives at the location and sees May tied up. He reaches her only to find that she's in illusion. Craven appears equipped with the exact same tech on Mysterio's drones. Peter and Craven have another fight where Craven ultimately utilizes his weapons and gadgets. As they fight, Craven leads Peter through his lair, any advantage Peter's suit may have provided, null and void by Craven's night vision visor. Peter is doing his best to keep up, but he just can't cut it. Craven beats Peter, but he doesn't kill him. Instead, Craven disables all illusions before taking his leave, and Peter finally sees May lying on the floor in the distance. A badly injured Peter crawls towards her, calling out until he realizes it's too late. Craven has already killed her. Peter holds May's lifeless body, his cries echoing out in the open room. Peter returns to the safe house holding May's body. He's frozen. Standing there, Peter grieves with Happy until sorrow eventually gives way to rage. Craven cannot be allowed to continue, lest Peter's convictions condemn his loved ones to death. MJ warns Peter not to play into what the public projects onto him and become the monster Mysterio made him out to be. And yet, her pleas fall on deaf ears. Too many have suffered. It's Peter's turn to pick the hunting grounds, and it's his time to go on the offensive. Ditching the stealth suit, Peter returns to the city clad in his classic red and blues. He makes his way to Times Square. This is no time for hiding. You wanted me, here I am. All eyes are on him as police begin to arrive on the scene. Though his spidey sense alerts him to Craven's presence nearby, the hunter doesn't yet reveal himself. In anticipation of the final showdown, the police begin to advance, and it's here we have a near mirror image of our opening sequence. Just as Peter goes to swing off, the glass of an adjacent building explodes, giving way to an armored SUV which crushes car after car. As Peter swings upward to avoid the debris, Craven emerges, leaning out of the car window to hurl a spear at Spider-Man's swinging form in the distance. Peter quickly changes direction, catching the spear midair and using his downward momentum to throw it back at his attacker. He's done running. Though Peter's aim was true, the spear impales the car's tire as Craven swerves to avoid the impact. Abandoning his defunct vehicle, Craven tears through both police and civilians alike as the news crews begin to arrive at the scene, heedless of those who stand between him and his ultimate prey. Spider-Man dashes toward Craven, redirecting the hunter and throwing others clear as best as he can to avoid a body count. The final showdown begins in earnest as Peter darts in and out of the building, slowly stripping the tech from Craven's body. The pressure's on and the cameras are rolling, but the hunt won't so easily be concluded. Amid the flurry of blows, Craven grabs hold of Peter and rips off his mask. He makes it known that Peter has earned his respect, but that won't be enough to win. Craven taunts Peter about May's death, but Peter fights with the whole world watching, his face laid bare for all to see, bloodied, bruised, and panicked, but still just the face of a child. Spider-Man, the so-called menace of the city, is just a boy risking his life before their eyes, just a child who won't stand for the carnage wrought by this madman. It's this image, plastered on the screen of New York for all to see, that plants the seed. Perhaps Spider-Man isn't the villain Mysterio set him out to be. Knowing the close combat capabilities of Craven, Peter decides to play the long game, committing to a grueling process of wearing him down. Before long, both are exhausted, but at this point, it's a battle of wills. Left with nothing but a serrated bow staff, Peter successfully disarms Craven, webbing him down to the ground with a foot on his chest. Fueled by a bone-deep rage to just end him, to end it all, Spider-Man holds his staff and contemplates dealing the final blow. However, in the midst of all this carnage, Peter thinks of all that's happened, of May's teachings, of Tony's faith, of MJ's strength. He looks around, seeing the people of New York watching and waiting. What will Spider-Man do? He realizes that Spider-Man is more than him, more than his name and face, more than his hurts and pains. Spider-Man is an idea. He's an inspiration, and Peter just can't betray that. He drops the staff and walks off. The chief of police quickly orders his men to take Peter into custody to arrest the Spider-Man. They all refuse. A few weeks later, Peter walks into the court doors as his trials begin. With Craven's defeat, the technology he commandeered after Mysterio's death is left unused. With this functioning illusion tech as evidence, Jennifer builds a strong case proving beyond a reasonable doubt that Mysterio was a con artist. This, in combination with the Times Square battle, formally redeems Spider-Man in the eyes of the law, if not wholly in the court of public opinion. After Jennifer tells him to keep in touch, Peter exits the courthouse to find MJ and Ned waiting outside. The three share a hug, finally able to breathe a sigh of relief. Later that week, Peter hosts a small funeral for May, with many of his high school classmates in attendance, even Flash. Sunshine dawns behind him on this quiet morning as Peter eulogizes his beloved aunt. He reflects on his coming 18th birthday, the first he'll spend without her. 2 weeks later, Peter attends his high school graduation ceremony. As the class valedictorian, MJ makes a brief speech about finding truth among lies. Listening to these words, Peter considers what it means to be Spider-Man. He is the underdog. He loves his city and its people, even when they fear, question, and doubt him. He smiles. Peter understands the true meaning of being Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility.